With all of our presentations here at Royal Roads, we like to acknowledge that Royal Roads University rests upon the lands of the Quisepsum and Lekwungen families. We are so fortunate to be living, learning, and working on these lands that have hosted learning and teaching for many years past, so beautifully in the present, and will continue on into the future. So my name is Selena Kunar. I'm an education advisor here at Royal Roads University, and I'll be helping moderate today's chat. We are also joined by Dr. Elizabeth Childs, who's the program head of our Masters of Arts in Learning and Technology, and some of our wonderful current students who we'll get to meet shortly. Before we dive further into who we are, we'd love to know a little bit more about all of you. So if you feel comfortable checking out our chat box and letting us know, where are you joining us from? What brought you to our session today? And perhaps what sector you're working in? So as the introductions are coming in our chat box, I'll continue exploring how we're going to move through our hour today. So next, we'll head into a highlight of the Learning and Technology programs here at Royal Roads University. Then get to the exciting part of the session, chatting with our students. After we get an opportunity to chat with our students, we will have a question and conversation period. So this will be a great time to use our chat box and ask our students any questions that you may have about learning in these turbulent times. And if time allows, we'll provide a resource roundup and give you some information about how you connect with different services on our campus. So looking in our chat box, we have a hello and welcome from Elizabeth and Brandon, Chad from Langley, who teaches at VCIT, who you will hear from shortly, Diane, who's interested in seeing what's available and if this makes any sense for me as we move forward in my career. We have Brandon from Oshawa, Ontario, a learning technologist specialist and part-time professor at Durham College. And then Diane from Ontario as well. So very neat. We're all over Canada with this session today. So please continue popping in your introductions in our chat box. And I recommend folks taking a peek because this is a great opportunity to learn about all of the different folks who come together to be a part of a program as special as this one. And speaking of our special programs, I'll hand the microphone over to Dr. Elizabeth Childs to tell us a little bit more about them.
Thanks so much, Selena, and thanks all of you for making time to join us today. I know in our busy lives right now, it's hard to carve out these moments, so I really do appreciate you taking time to come and be part of this conversation. Those who are watching the recording afterwards, thank you for, again, making time to watch a recording and see the chat box, and we encourage you to reach out if you have any questions or wanted to follow up with any of us afterwards. As Selena said, one of the things I love about doing webinars with Selena is she's so proficient at really getting us in quickly in the chat box to start to build a sense of community. And that's really one of the underpinnings at Royal Roads University. We have a learning, teaching, and research model. And it is what we refer to internally as our signature pedagogy for the institution. So you can think of it as sort of that baseline understanding that all schools and faculties at the institution and all staff and employees take up as they think about what counts as learning, what counts as teaching, and what counts as research, and how do we take them up in our work. And so I'll put the link to that there in the chat box in a minute, but it's really, for those of you thinking about Royal Roads University, it's a really great starting point because it gives you that sense of what does this university believe in? How do they go about learning and teaching and research? And so I encourage you to take a look at that as sort of a foundational frame as you're doing your decision making. I have the privilege of having under my folio this master's program and a diploma program in learning and technology. And you can see the details quickly there on the slide. I've put the link in the chat to the program. The program was redesigned in 2017. It went live with the redesign around 3 core principles: openness, network learning, and the development of a digital mindset. And so as a result, the program is open. When you go to that link, you can see all of the courses. They're on the right-hand side. The acronyms will drive you crazy, but you know, that's what acronyms do. So there's LRNT 521, which would be the first course. click on that. It's in WordPress. The course sites are open, Creative Commons licensed by attribution. So you're welcome to view them. You can view the assignments, you can view the rubrics, you can view the content, the readings. Most of our readings are completely open site readings. Some of them we had to access through the Railroads Library. But they are also ones that you can access as part of a Railroads University student. Most of them, and we're continuing to move most to that fully open space. What this allows us to be able to do is to meet the criteria to have the nomenclature of a zero textbook degree. So there are no textbooks that are required to be purchased as part of this degree program, in keeping with the design principles of openness, networked learning, and development of a digital mindset. So you can see all the courses there. You also are able to see the student blogs. And one of the things that came through loud and clear from the external review that helped inform the design of this, the redesign of this program, was that students and employers from all the different sectors that people in this program come from really wanted that opportunity to build out that networked learning piece and to connect into these larger spaces. And so all students in the program are given a WordPress blog that they use throughout all their coursework and then can export and use in their professional career going forward. And so it's something that we really do value as a way to disseminate knowledge and to share and give back as you're going through your learning journey. The other thing I would mention, so you can go in, if you go into each of the courses, then you'll see the student blogs on the right-hand side. We also have, as part of this program, we kick off with a virtual symposium, and we have for many years now. This is our coming up to our fifth virtual symposium. It has 3 tracks, so it's a week-long virtual conference, which pre-pandemic, people were starting to get into, and now everyone is doing, which is fabulous because it really allows you to jump in and share these experiences in different ways. So the 3 tracks in the virtual symposium are sort of experts in the field, stories from the field, practitioners who are actually doing the work in these spaces in different sectors, and then our students, because in the program, there are 3 different exit pathways. And so our students have the choice of how they would like to exit their program, the work they would like to focus on, whether it's a thesis, an applied research project, or a digital learning research consulting project. They all present on that. And so I'll put the link in the chat to the virtual symposium, because for all of you who are listening in, you've got 4+ years worth of recorded sessions. It's this wonderful professional development opportunity. It's fully open. Please share it, reuse it, recirculate it, and hopefully learn from it and enjoy the experience of dipping into some of these sessions. The last thing that I would mention about this program, and then just glancing at the chat to see where different people are coming from, is you're very representative of the program itself and who it attracts. This is not a unidimensional program in terms of a sector base. So the field of instructional design, educational technology, learning sciences, openness, networked learning, as all of those converge, they touch multiple sectors. And so this program, I think one of the things for me personally that makes it so exciting is you'll be learning with people that are from very different spaces than perhaps you are. So you may be working in the social not-for-profit sector, you may be working in finance, you may be working in healthcare, you may be working in traditional higher ed institutions, you may be a K-12 educator, you may be an informal learning educator, you might be a consultant, self-employed, you might work for a variety of transport situations. We've had people in this program from so many different sectors, and they come with all of that learning and all of that lived experience, and then bring it to bear on working in the community as you move through the coursework. And so you really get multiple points of view and multiple ways to deal with some complex, messy issues. And so that's such a lovely benefit of this program. I think what I'll do is stop there and pop a few links that I'd mentioned in the chat. But what I'd like to do now, and really the focus of this, is to introduce our speakers today, who I've just had I'm so privileged to have had time both learning with and learning from and to work with over the past 2 years. So we have Brandon Carson with us today, who's just finishing up his Master's of Arts in Learning and Technology. He's worked in higher ed for over 12 years, and he's currently, as you can see in the chat, a learning technology specialist and a part-time professor at Durham College in Ontario. He's a member of the Ontario Tech Educational Informatics Lab. I'll put the link in the chat for that one too, in case you'd like to check out some of that work. And he recently completed a secondment with eCampus Ontario, where he led the open educational resources and adaptive learning projects at the provincial level. So Brandon, welcome. Thank you for making time for us today and for joining and sharing your experiences. We also have Christy Boyce with us today, who's worked as a critical care respiratory therapist for over 16 years and 4 years as an instructor in healthcare simulation training. After she shifted into community care and teaching patients how to manage their chronic illnesses, she really wanted to engage in some graduate studies and chose the MALAT program, which we're forever grateful. 6 months later, she joined the virtual health team at Fraser Health, which first as the project lead and now as their very new position of a virtual health learning consultant. So you'll really get a really nice perspective on the work that Christy has been doing over these past few years. So welcome, Christy, and thank you for joining us. And we also have Chad Flynn joining us. And you see in the chat that Chad has been working in vocational education for the past 11 years. He's currently at BCIT. He's really striving to bring open pedagogy to the trades and has a passion for student success that has allowed him to really change how trades education is happening in not only the province, but also how we view it in Canada and beyond. He's currently the BCIT Open Educational Fellow and is completing a fellowship with BC Campus. And this little part on the bio just warms my heart, but he says that it's been life-changing and transformational, his experience in the MALAT program, and it's led to many opportunities and experiences. And I think that's the case for all three that we have with us today. And so Chad, thanks for joining us. And for all of you, I will just turn it over to you and Selena, and I really am so thankful that you've made time to share your experience. As I know everyone on this call and those listening to the recording, when you make a decision to embark on a graduate program, you just aren't really quite sure what you're getting into. And so this peels back that layer a little bit more. So thanks so much, and I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and let's explore some of the really wonderful questions we have for our current students. So perhaps I can throw it over to you, Chad, first to talk a little bit about what was the most surprising or meaningful part of your online learning experience amid this pandemic?
I'm glad you put it as amid this pandemic, because when we talk about the whole overall arching thing, like I mentioned in my bio there is so much that I couldn't begin to, I'd take up the whole hour talking about it. Just in the pandemic part, the thing that really struck me was we were just coming to the end of our program. And we were just finishing up, we're writing our theses, we're getting ready to defend, we're going through edits, and then pandemic hit. And what I found was really helpful was just everything that I'd learned in the previous 2 years really came into play at that moment, because I had teach at BCIT, and all the network learning and all like the personal learning network that we'd set up and all that came into play because we were suddenly having to take trades education and put it online, which had never been done before, and people thought it couldn't be done. So being able to reach out to the resources that I had available through the MALAT program, through all the information that I had learned through the MALAT program, I was able to kind of take a champion role at BCIT and help get set up at least the electrical program. And so that's kind of parlayed into a bunch of different other opportunities. Like I'm now doing a consulting project for the Commonwealth of Learning, helping some African countries bring their TVET programs online, and working across with other programs and institutions across Canada to do that. So all of this would not have been possible had I not gone through this whole MALAT program. I mean, I'd always loved educational technology. I always loved pushing the boundaries with education. But with everything that I learned, and again, I can't even begin to express how much I've learned or even get into it now, but there's just so much that allowed us to help pivot and help bring other institutions and instructors online.
Thank you so much, Chad. Oh, I so appreciate you being able to share not only what learning was like in the program, but how you're able to apply that learning in real time. So thank you so much. Christy, would you like to share about what may have been the most surprising or meaningful part of your learning experience in the pandemic?
Sure. Yeah, just about everything. So, working in the virtual health team pre-COVID, we were a very small team. There was 3 project leaders, clinical project leaders, and we were pulling at people to try and get them to do virtual consultations or teach patients online. So COVID hits, and all of a sudden we have thousands of practitioners that instantaneously need that skill, and they need training, they need resources, they need learning. So instantaneously, our team, quadrupled in size. We pulled from every resource we possibly could in the organization, and all of my skills came into play. I guided our institution, our organization in strategy, leading with leadership values that we talked about in the leadership component of the MALAT program, transparency, compassion, like amidst the chaos. These are healthcare providers, right? So a lot of those learnings about values-based leadership came to play. I used my skill in understanding digital networks and how to leverage those social learnings to create a virtual health alliance, which is a networked group of super users, so that the super users could train their own staff. And so they remain connected to us. So it's a community of inquiry model, and I utilize them to get feedback and then back design any of my programs and my trainings. You name it, like there was so much applicable, and it was instantaneous. That I needed the skill and actually could call on the skill and had the skill available. So it was wonderful. And echoing Chad, so many resources that if you didn't know, you could look back in your coursework, you could reach out to each other, right? We all leaned into each other on Slack. We have back channels on Slack that we continuously call on each other and say, hey, do you know where this is? Or can anyone help me with this? So we had massive community and massive resources to pull from. It was wonderful.
Oh, thanks so much, Christy. I'm sensing that theme that it was not school in this hand and work in this hand. Your worlds became quite intertwined, as we hope from the learning through these programs. So thank you. Brandon, over to you to chat a little bit about what was most surprising or meaningful for you.
It's hard going last on this. I'm going to echo everything Chad and Christy said. Everything I learned in the MALAT program set me up to be successful in my work in supporting faculty to move online. I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I'm going to go meaningful, and I'm going to talk about the education aspect to it. What was most meaningful is the support. So our faculty were so supportive in realizing that we were in a global pandemic, helping us through the process, because being a student with young children at home, having full-time jobs, trying to balance them being at home while you're trying to do your work, the faculty were there to support us. They let us know that they understood what we're going through and really help us through the whole journey, which was very meaningful to me, because I used to have a very strict schedule where I work during the day. I have a few hours with my kids after school, and then I'm doing work as they go to sleep. And that whole schedule shifted when the pandemic started. So seeing how supportive our faculty were, and as Christy mentioned, all of our fellow classmates, we really became one solid cohort. We have a Slack community, we all talk. And as we were moving online, we all talked about the approaches we were using with teaching online for those that were teaching and for those who were in other industries. We found ways where it all worked and connected. So the most meaningful part to me was support from our fellow students and faculty.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And that segues beautifully to the next question that's on everyone's mind. What was the most challenging part of this experience? Chad, maybe I'll throw it back over to you.
Yeah. I'm going to, I guess, piggyback off of Brandon, because I too, I've got 4 kids. So suddenly to have to do all of this in my house and I had a 1-year-old at the time, or now I have a 1-year-old. So my wife was on maternity leave, as well as having a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old and a 17-year-old, all jumping. My office is in the basement, and upstairs is where the kids' rooms are. So they were jumping off. It'd be like a whole earthquake going on down here. So doing that, trying to intermix all. And as we were getting, like I mentioned before, we were winding up on our theses too. So lots of time needed to be spent writing and editing. And the one thing that, and again, I'm just going to reach out and say about Brandon and Christy, is the 3 of us did the thesis track, and to be able to reach out to these other 2 amazing individuals when we were struggling with things, or saying, hey, are you guys dealing with this? I had an issue with formatting with APA, which if you're looking into joining the course, you're going to absolutely love. I mentioned it on Twitter, and within seconds, I had Brandon sending me a message on Slack. Within minutes, we were having a Zoom session. He's walking me through when I didn't even realize that there was a little template I could have been using this whole time. So it was just having those kind of things. Hard, yes, but again, because the way that the program's set up, we set up such a great community that yes, it was difficult in parts, but it was just having that support there was just amazing through the faculty as well, not just the fellow students.
Christy, over to you. Tell us a little bit about what you found challenging in this experience.
I think definitely time management was definitely the most challenging. Same, you know, I'm a mom. I have 2 kids and a dog underneath my feet right now and lots going on. And I was transitioning out of a career that I'd been in for 16 years and into a new space of corporate and all the learnings and the curve that came with project management and corporate life. And for a little blip, I hopped out of the virtual health team into the quality improvement team, and they put me in a 16-week Lean Six Sigma Black Belt course on top of my MALAT. So there was some juggling, but you need to just be clear with your family in, you know, roles, responsibilities, and where are you going to carve out the time. So I was a nighttime studier, and I would, you know, settle in. Dad's doing dinner tonight, and I would settle in. I would do like a 5-hour block and then get it done, or I could take a weekend. Just needed to be really clear. If it works for you to get up early in the morning, then get up in the morning. The time management was probably the biggest challenge. But I think what was different, and I had only recently done my bachelor's right before. I waited a long time because I has my diploma in respiratory therapy. So I waited a long time to do my bachelor's. And the difference was very clear and obvious to me in graduate studies that they wanted me to succeed. The faculty really wanted me to succeed, and that you could reach out if you were struggling, and that was supported. So I think that was the biggest difference. So challenges, time management for sure, but you know, you just make the space and set the environment for success, and off you go.
Awesome. Thanks, Christy. And thank you, Chad. That brings us over to Brandon. Brandon, do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the challenges?
Time management, I know with Christy, was probably the most difficult. And I guess the second one would be, I'm trying to think of the right word to use here, but basically use the services that are available to you. So at first, I didn't want to use all the great services that Railroads had available to me as a student. I thought, no, I can get through this on my own, but take advantage of the library, take advantage of the Writing Center. They have tons of supports here to support you through your learning journey. Don't be embarrassed to use them. You're paying for those services. So talk to the library, they'll help you find great articles. Talk to the Writing Center, they'll help improve your writing. I know some students are not coming straight from doing an undergrad, like Christy just said. You may be out of the classroom for quite some time, or maybe never even did an undergrad. These supports will help you get to the place you need to be successful in the program.
Thanks so much, Brandon. You know, we had a lot of questions come in around how did they do it? How did you work full-time, study full-time, family full-time, personal life full-time? How did you make it all happen? How did you balance that? We touched on that a little bit already, but I'd love if we could give some time to chatting about some tips and tricks you might have for folks who are thinking about also embarking on that journey. So I see some thinking faces going on, but
I'll chime in.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, I think you need to be really clear with your leaders, you know, if it's at work, depending on, you know, their personality. But they all knew what I was doing. They knew the value of the master's learnings that I was going to come away with. They knew that I was engaging in the thesis work, that I would be capable of, you know, starting some virtual health research at the end. So I would say, you know, leverage the team that you have at hand in terms of work and at home. And get everyone invested in your success. And like I spoke to earlier, I had to really carve out the time and found my groove with it. Night times worked for me. Personal life took a back seat and a back burner, but everybody knew what I was doing. So they were like my cheerleaders in the background. So yeah, you set priorities, and it's only for a short time. It's only a couple of years. We all three of us took extensions because of COVID, right? To finish our thesis work. So it was a little bit longer than anticipated, but it's so incredibly valuable, and you're not doing it alone. So I think that community aspect is massive and incredible, and as Elizabeth spoke to, ingrained in the program. So
Thanks so much, Christy. Chad, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think just to kind of, again, build on everything that's already been said, but your partner, whether it's your spouse or whoever, your life partner, they're in it with you as well. And so that's one thing I really made sure. My wife had gone through a doctorate, and I had supported her through that. So I understood what it took. So when we did it, we sat down and decided that we were going to do this, because she understood that there was going to be times where I wasn't going to be able to be present, and I might have to be in sessions or not be able to take kids to hockey. So time management was huge. And for me, I can't work at night. So I would get up at 4 a.m. and I would do my readings and writings at that time, because that was my time to work, which actually worked well with Brandon because he's 3 hours ahead. So if I ever needed help, I could talk to him. He was up around that time anyways. So it was, yeah, but you just have to find those times, because it takes a lot of time out of your day. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. It's worth every second of it and every reading of it, everything of it. But you do have to carve that time, and you have to make sure that your family's on board, because if they're not, then there's going to be some hard fought battles in there.
It takes a team. Thanks so
Mm-hmm.
much, Chad. Brandon, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I'm going to start off by saying Chad would message me before I would wake up. I'd wake up to a message from Chad, and he's 3 hours away from me. So he found out what worked well for him in his studies. And I think that's one of the most important parts to do. Figure out what times you can get your work done. So I always carved out hours at night. My rule was after the kids go to bed, I spend a bit of time with my wife. And then from 8:30, 9 o'clock on until 1 or 2 in the morning, that's when I'm doing all my schoolwork. It was a lot of commitment, but it's worth it in the end. I also think it's important to kind of see what people had to do. So like I had 3 children, a full-time job, part-time job, studies, presenting at conferences, all that going on, and I was still able to do my studies. So don't feel like you're not going to be able to work through the program. There's a very nice way to balance it all out, and you're going to have a lot of support from your classmates. Chad and Christy supported me so much through encouragement, reminders of deadlines. We just all worked. Have you read this article? All that type of stuff. You really work as a community. And it is important to get your friends and family all in the loop on what your current goals are with your studies, so they can be there to support you and they fully understand what's going on. When I went to residency, I took the blended option. My third-born daughter was just born, I think, 2 weeks before. So my wife was left at home with 3 kids, 5 and under. As I went out to Victoria, my mom came and helped, but still, before I registered, I asked my wife, if I take the blended option, I'm going to be gone right after our baby is born. And she said, do you think you're going to get a lot of being on campus? I said, I really do. She said, do it. We'll figure it out. So as Chad said, it's really important to get your family all in support of what you're doing. And same with friends, work colleagues, and so on.
Wow, thank you all for those helpful tips and tricks. We'll continue talking on some of the questions that came up from those who registered, but for those of us who are live, please, in our chat box, pop any questions you might have for Chad, Christy, and Brandon. You have the awesome opportunity to have all 3 of them at your fingertips. So please ask away in the chat box, and we'll turn our attention to that shortly. As mentioned, all 3 of you had completed the thesis track in this program. I think it would be really neat to hear a little bit about what you explored while you're finishing up your thesis now. So I don't know who'd like to go first. Perhaps I can take a look at whoever unmutes first. Oh, Christy, awesome.
There we go. Sorry, my mute was not unmuting. Sure. Yeah. So I had done 4 or 5 years of my work as a respiratory therapist was as a simulation instructor or facilitator. So I taught advanced cardiac life support to nurses, doctors, and respiratory therapists. But I also taught infant resuscitation. It's a program called Neonatal Resuscitation Program. It's across Canada. And same thing, I facilitated the learnings for RTs, nurses, midwives, and physicians. So I could see from the readings I was doing in the MALAT program and my previous experiences as a facilitator in those programs that there was maybe a mismatch and lost opportunity for learning in those programs, specifically hinging around psychological safety of the training environment. So I decided to prepare the learners a little bit differently and more in advance by building them an online learning module. So I built them an online learning module and leveraged what we call the pre-briefing part of a simulation to prepare the learners to set expectations so they knew how they would be assessed, so they knew what the goals and the objectives were. And I placed it online. It's a little 20-minute module. And I did qualitative interviews and studied the impact of that module. So that was my thesis research. And it turned out fantastically well, really interesting. And I'm really hoping to leverage that to make some changes in the program in the future at Fraser Health.
Wow, Christy, very interesting indeed. Oh my gosh. You could have a whole webinar just telling us about that. That's so cool. Thanks for sharing. Chad, did you want to tell us a little bit about what you explored?
Sure. I love talking about this stuff. So with my students with trades education, typically what we'll do is I teach in the electrical program. So we have 10 weeks of online or face-to-face theory courses. So a lot of it is just lecture or was lecture. And I felt like that was didn't really connect with trade students because they were used to learning how to construct and troubleshoot and build and maintain. And here I was standing up in front of a classroom just talking at them. So I started really focusing on how to get my students more involved and engaged with the course. And so what I ended up doing when I came to Royal Roads was learning about open education and open educational resources and practices and involving students in creating their own learning resources. And so what I did was I have my students this morning, they were working on it actually, create their own textbooks. And so what we do is I have them work in groups, and from these slide decks that I give them, they build out these textbooks that end up being unbelievably beautiful and full of rich information. So again, I reached out to my students, and we had a third party conduct some interviews, and there was a survey that went out. So there's a bunch of information that I got from there. So I was able to analyze the data from that, and it's gone on into my thesis.
Oh my gosh, Chad, that is so neat. When you said make their own textbooks, my jaw literally dropped. That is so cool.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. And I'll note that in the chat box, Elizabeth has been popping some presentations that these folks have done via the virtual symposium. So if you're excited about learning more, please click on those links. And I know I will be after this session for sure. So Brandon, over to you. Did you want to tell us about what you explored?
I was also on the open educational resources topic, just like Chad, and I focused on the barriers that faculty face to adopting open educational resources into their teaching practices. The reason I chose that, though, was because after 1 year in the program, I was a successful candidate to work at eCampus Ontario, which is a provincial organization that supports all Ontario colleges and universities with using technology-enabled learning. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without what I've learned in the MALAT program. So from that, my job was actually to support faculty with using open educational resources, creating and adopting open educational resources for business-specific programs. So from that, I just seen a real tie of, I wanted to know, well, why wouldn't a faculty use open educational resources? If they're there, it's going to save students money. I wanted to know, why wouldn't they do that? So from that, I started asking more questions. Through my thesis supervisor, we came up with the research questions, and it was awesome. We had over 71 responses from 12 out of the 24 colleges in Ontario, because it focused on specifically the college sector and business programs at the college sector. So it was an awesome experience, and a lot has been learned, and excited to do more future research in this area in the future.
Thanks so much, Brandon, and for highlighting that this exploration, it starts with a question. And I love how inquisitive you were about that and how it's blossomed into where you are now. So again, please, everyone, check out the links that Elizabeth has popped into our chat box to explore more about what all of these wonderful people are doing with their learnings from the program. This is my favorite question, but I recognize it's a tough one. So what would you recommend to those who are considering taking the program right now? Do you have any helpful tips and tricks, thoughts, guidance? Christy.
Chime in. Yep. Sorry, Brandon. You know I'm always going to beat you to the punch when it comes to opening my mouth. So I would say what was surprising to me, because I came in, I did the blended as well with Brandon. So we were on campus for 2 weeks. But there was no one else in our smaller cohort. We blended into obviously the online group, but there was no one really else from healthcare. So I thought, oh, I don't know at first, if this is going to work. But I really just listened from their contexts and then through my lens, and found so much that was applicable in so many completely new ways to healthcare. It was like, okay, well, why aren't we doing that in healthcare? And why aren't we trying that over here? And the contexts were so diverse. We had we had a chef, we had a vet who was doing Guitars for Vets program. Like, we had the full gamut, and everyone contributed something in conversation or assignments where I could pull and say, oh, we could so do that in healthcare, and that would be innovative. So I would say, really, when you come to the program, when you come to the program, you need to keep your mind open, and just through that listening lens, think about, new creative ways to innovate outside of context. And we're all working often in complex systems. And so to make any movements forward, you need to try and test little cycles of change. So trying out new little things is a brilliant way to make progress.
Thanks so much, Christy. Brandon, I saw your hand excitedly go up too. Did you want to share next?
Yeah, sure. Mine's very simple. Just do it. You're going to be happy. You're going to be so happy that you're a MALAT student. I had the pleasure of being a cohort rep for the blended group, but also afterwards being brought in with the online and blended group as a whole. And whenever you'd ask, hey, is there any recommendations we could be bringing up to our program head? It was always no. Everyone is so happy going through this program. I think if you asked any student who is about to graduate from this cohort, all a happy, great experience, and they were happy they did it. And I think just seeing that from over 20 to 30 students says enough here. Do it, you're gonna be happy.
Thanks so much, Brandon. Chad, was there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, just realize that just because it's online doesn't mean you're not going to have community and friendships formed. That's one big, huge thing that blew me away. I thought online would be great because I'm an introverted type of person, so I like to do all the work on my own. And then suddenly we were kind of forced into these groups. And then from there, you start to get to know people, and the community that's been built and the friendships that have been formed from this course alone have been life-changing, right? Like, we all joke about how Brandon and I chat back and forth, and Christy, like, we're all always chatting through Slack, the three of us. And then there's other relationships that were formed through these groups. So people that you could reach out to if you're having a hard time with anything, even if it's not even to do with the course, you're just sharing life with people. The online thing is just unbelievable when it comes to the fact that it can build community. And like Brandon just put in the chat here, like, we're presenting together. And so he lives in Ontario and I live in British Columbia. It's crazy, but it's working, and it's great. So that's one thing I really appreciate about the MALAT program, was the connectedness that it brings, and realizing that online learning does not mean that you're an individual doing this on your own.
Wow, thank you so much, Chad. For those who are live and you get the pleasure of peeking into our chat box, oh my gosh, these three are so hilarious, and you can tell are so bonded. Brandon has just said that Chad will be moving to Ontario soon. So That's brought us full circle to the questions that were asked in our registration page. So what we'll do now is I want to share a few more slides while people are thinking about more questions you want to ask these wonderful, wonderful folks. So please pop questions in our chat box as I'm moving through these next few slides. So with that said, I'm just going to share my screen with all of you. So for those of you who are, as Christy said, going to be taking this program, here are some upcoming intakes. So the next intake will begin March 29th, 2021, putting its application deadline December 29th, 2020. If you're planning a little bit further out, we do have our 2022 date posted as well. So that intake will begin March 28th of 2020, putting its application deadline at December 28th, 2021. If you have any questions about this program, so flow, courses, dates, cost, anything like that, please do connect with our enrollment services teams. They're wonderful and they have their fingertips on the answers to any questions you may have about these programs, but also any others on our campus as well. So if you're joining us from Canada, please connect with our enrollment advisors at learn.more@ruralroads.ca. And if you're joining us internationally, our international admissions and registration team would love to continue the conversation at learn.more.international@ruralroads.ca. And Elizabeth has been doing such a wonderful job keeping us up to date in the chat box with the links that we've been chatting with about so far. But if you'd like to stay in touch and keep up to date with the program, please feel free to follow up in any emails that have come out regarding this webinar. Again, check out the course site. We have our link posted here. It'll also be linked into the follow-up that'll go out to all of our registrants. And join the conversation on Twitter using hashtag RRUMALAT. So that is hashtag RRUMALAT. So with that, I'll stop sharing my slides once again and pop back into our chat box.
Selena, just as you do that, I'd put it in the chat, but you know, when it's in words, people sometimes like, I can ignore that. So you've heard a lot of fabulous accolades for the program. And I'm sure there are some of you who are thinking, okay, come on, tell me some of the stuff that was really hard, right? Please don't hesitate. This is your time. You've committed some time and some space in your day to really investigate. And if you're thinking about doing your graduate programming, you should be really investigating. You should be doing your research and finding out, is this program a fit for me? Why not? What would make it a fit? So if you have some of those, what you would think are harder questions, please ask them. This is a great opportunity to ask them and really get some authentic responses about that. So I would really encourage you to put your unsureness aside and just pop them in the chat and let us know, and then the three speakers can speak to that a little bit more. One of the things that I've popped in there, and I'm wondering if Brendan and Chad and Christy, you could speak to a little bit maybe while we're waiting for questions to come in, is when this program launched. I mean, the program's been around since 1999 in various shapes and forms. It was initially a Master's of Arts in Distributed Learning. That was the term at the time, and then it moved into all these other acronyms, and now it's our Learning and Technology program. In 2017, when it went through this whole refresh to make it contemporary, one of the things we heard back from all of the stakeholder groups that we spoke to, and there was an extensive consultation done even with the review from different sectors, was that the role of someone with these skills, whether they're an instructional designer, education technologist, learning scientist, the role profile of someone with these skills was changing, and that it needed the skills, but it also needed the leadership piece. No longer were people being expected to just be the webbies coding in the corner and making some really cool animation for their course or a course for someone else. They were expected to sit at the table and have difficult conversations around the affordances of technology, what we know about learning, and in general, from the neuroscience perspective, and all the good research in learning sciences, and help their institutions and organizations make some really thoughtful choices around the way forward for learning. And I'm wondering, so part of that hopefully has woven its way into the program and in the courses you've experienced, but I'm wondering if you could also maybe just speak a little bit to that. Are you seeing that in your workplaces? Have you had that experience? And maybe just share a little bit for the folks.
Sure, I can take that. So I think I spoke to this a little bit earlier in the conversation, this massive shift to virtual health, and we had to establish coordination centers of executive directors and directors to make decisions on which way do we go and what do we offer our practitioners. But there was a lot of times where I had to really lean into my learnings to say, no, we can't go that direction. That's not where we should go. A lot of change management and talking about enabling people through technology and adoption of the technology that we're giving them, right? Like when you roll out Zoom and WhatsApp and FaceTime to an entire organization that's never been allowed to use anything like that before, how do you get them to adopt it quickly, really quickly? So there was a huge component of me leaning into the technology acceptance model, which happened to be a framework that I used in my thesis and that we learned about in our coursework, and using that to frame next steps and how to enable all these healthcare providers to feel confident that we needed a platform that was easy to use, that it was useful to them. So a huge skill set that was required and allowed me to sit intelligently in very high level conversations, meet a little respiratory therapist, right? Shifted into a completely new position now as a learning consultant, and it's my vision. I set the vision, I did a presentation, it's my plan, and I will take the organization forward, period. So that's incredible that I feel confident enough because of going through this program to do that. So yeah, it's been incredible. Yeah, really wide, diverse range of skills. And I was going to say, if anyone's hesitant because they're maybe not in a space where they're loving their career and they wanted to change, that's where I was, right? So I was like, okay, MALAT, I think I had a friend who'd gone through it many, many years ago. And I thought, okay, I've heard a little bit about it, and I really like, the techie aspects of my job, and I can pick things up quickly. And I loved the concepts of learning and teaching and education, and I loved seeing people succeed. So I just started leveraging my assignments. So when I was sent to do an assignment and I needed to, find a topic, I would kind of lean into where did I want to go in the organization? And I started submitting those assignments. I actually sent it to the leader of the virtual health team at one point, and she was like, who is this girl, right? So that landed me a job. It landed me a 1-day-a-week job. And then they said, you can do more. And then that was it. So you can leverage your work and your assignments and your learnings to change your career into a different path.
Wow, Christy, it is your vision, period, indeed. That is wonderful. Brandon, did you want to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I can say working in higher ed, master's required appears on almost every single job that I'm looking at now, whether it's anything in the learning area, teaching area, management area, they're asking for a master's. So this program has opened up way more doors by completing it for my future career goals, because before I kind of was at my peak. There was no chance of me going any higher with just an undergrad. So if you're thinking long-term, that's another big benefit of working through this. And I see a question from Allison in the chat. I don't know if we're going to do that one after, but that's an exciting question to answer as well.
Thank you so much, Brandon. And yes, we will absolutely be getting to Allison's question. Chad, before we head over to that question, was there anything you wanted to add on this?
I mean, it's already sort of been said, but I was kind of at the point, same with Christy, like what's the next step in my career? I love teaching, but I felt like there was a next step. And so I always loved technology, and I thought this would be a good mix. And it exceeded my expectations beyond. The opportunities it's afforded me has been unbelievable. I've taken on many consulting projects. I got to go work for eCampus Ontario on a project that was mind-blowing with Brandon on adaptive learning systems. And then I'm doing this one for the Commonwealth of Learning for Commonwealth of Learning. It's amazing. And then I'm getting people reach out all the time, and the opportunities to speak and to present and all these things that keep coming up. And it's just, none of this would have happened without the MALAT program. And so it's just, again, it's a great way to leverage what's next. And now we've seen with COVID that our skill set are much, much needed. And so you'll see your LinkedIn looks will go way up with having a MALAT on it. It's been incredible that way, and the amount of people that reach out. So very exciting.
Wow. Thank you so much. I feel a bit like a broken record just thinking and saying, wow, to all of the information that you guys are sharing. I so appreciate that. And from our chat box, I can tell that those of us who are watching live appreciate it as well. To get to Allison's wonderful question, how did you decide to do a thesis versus a research paper or a digital learning research consulting project? And did you find one was picked more than others by your fellow students? Brandon.
Finally beat Christy. Great. The reason I picked was actually the same reason Christy wrote in the chat. It was just to open up more doors in the future. I do plan on doing a doctorate program at some point, and this just opens that door to be able to do it by going through the thesis. I would say that we were probably on the lower end when it comes to exit pathways, because it was only the 3 of us out of the 20 some odd students that were in our program. So it was really neat to help us even become even closer together afterwards too, because we were kind of in this together, talking about due dates, deadlines, the approaches we were taking to our research, using the APA template, as Chad mentioned earlier. So we all got to kind of learn from each other as we were going through this. The one beautiful part is Christy's been a couple steps ahead of the whole way, it seems. So we keep getting to learn from what she's doing, and it's been really helpful. But that's the main reason I chose this exit pathway, is just to make sure that it opens more doors in the future for continued learning, lifelong learning.
Lifelong learning indeed. Chad, did you want to share a little bit about how you ended up in the thesis pathway?
I love challenges. And so I always wanted to I always knew that going into this, I would do a thesis because I always wanted to challenge myself into the writing and the research aspect of it. And then to echo again what Brandon and Christy said, I want to pursue my doctorate next. So this is kind of one of those stepping stones I think that I had to go through. And I'm so glad I did. Like, I know there's only 3 of us that ended up going through the process, but wow, it's been so good. It's been so challenging. And when you think you're done, you're nowhere near done. And then you've got to redo things and go through it again and again and again. And it feels like it's a broken record after a while, and you end up hating your thesis and loving it at the same time. So I think I was saying this to Elizabeth the other day. She told me that a thesis is like a child, because there's going to be times where you absolutely are in love with it, and other times it really frustrates you. And so at the end of the day, though, you fall absolutely head over heels in love with it. And that's what I found through my thesis. Is I'm so glad that I went through this whole process.
Yeah, I'll add I think Teresa's on the call. The Rru Writing Center is phenomenal from the get-go. Like from the very first, in our residency, we met Teresa and we learned about the resources. And if you're worried about academic writing, please don't be, because it's a journey. You learn from your mistakes. And Elizabeth I just read one of my early papers. She was very kind. She's very kind. I'm like, oh, it was terrible. But, they'll get you there slowly in stages. And Teresa's curated and created a fantastic resource in the library services that you just lean into and go back to again and again and again. And it's super easy just to search, like, how do I, cite this? How do I reference this? It's all there sitting, waiting for you. So lots to lean on if you're worried about the academic writing piece. Don't be.
Thank you all so much for sharing about how you ended up in the thesis pathway. Elizabeth, did you want to chat a tiny bit about what the other 2 pathways are and what they look like?
Sure, I've popped in the chat. So as part of the virtual symposium, you can see 2 Padlets. One is the Applied Research Project Padlet. And so in the Applied Research Project, sometimes you can think of it as that really early stage, right? So both the Applied Research Project and the Digital Learning Research Consulting Project are 6 credits. The thesis is a 12 credit. So it automatically, you're going to go very deep in a smaller area for 12 credits worth, right? The other 2, you're starting and you're having the 6 credit experience. there's a whole bunch, and we can send the links to the exit pathway presentations. There are lots of reasons people choose these different pathways, everything from what their employer is hoping they will be able to achieve from it, to what they want to personally achieve, what they want to investigate, what they're curious about in their research question. But generally, the applied research project pathway, you're going to be talking to between 1 and 5 people, and you've got a research question that you're going to go out and you're going to read all kinds of other literature that's already been done. You're not collecting data like Christy and Brandon and Chad have mentioned they had to do in their thesis, as part of their thesis. You're having conversations with up to 1 to 5 people under blanket ethics, and then you're reading a bunch of literature and bringing that all and synthesizing it around your research question. So it's a very helpful pathway to do if, for example, at your institution, they're starting to embark on something big like mobile learning, and that very first step needs to be done, right? What's been done out there already that's related to my context around this particular piece, and maybe that's employee engagement or something. The digital research consulting project pathway, it is where you're taking something that is this research curiosity at a very pragmatic level, and you are creating something. So for example, Christy mentioned, we had a chef in this group that went through, and she did the consulting project. You'll see her presentation on the Padlet, and her real interest was in the lab in culinary arts. It's very challenging to give feedback quickly to and deeply to all of the students who are tempering chocolate at the same time, right? It's really difficult to do that. You're moving station to station, they're having to describe what's happening, you're having to give feedback. So the feedback given is very short, and she wanted to make it more meaningful. And so what she ended up designing, she worked with their teaching and learning center and with the learning management system, and she designed a rubric that students could actually upload photos, she could put more comments in, and they could have much more of a robust conversation about this notion of tempering chocolate, for example. So she actually built that. And she also had to do all of the literature review, all of the analysis. Why did I come to build these things? What were my design decisions? And so that pathway tends to appeal for people that they've got sort of this really hands-on piece that they need, that they can carve out to do. I'm just checking in the chat here as people are popping in questions. It's great. So that's generally the two. And when you take a look at those Padlets, I think you'll get a better sense of where people tended to focus. As Brandon and Chrissy and Chad have mentioned, generally there is an application required to the thesis pathway, and not everyone who applies is admitted into that pathway. We generally have between 3 and 5 students a year, depending in that pathway. The bulk of students end up doing the applied research project pathway, but it really does depend year to year.
We had a great question about the thesis pathway. So from Diane, how did you decide on your thesis question? Was it something you were interested in from the start or before the start, or was it an interest that developed over the course of the degree?
Yeah, I can answer that one. For me, from my perspective, it was kind of something that was sub-hidden, and then certain learnings would kind of trigger it, and then I'd circle back to it. But even when we were working on the thesis proposal, the questions were revamped and tweaked and fine-tuned continuously, because I always think too big. Elizabeth was always like, break it down, Christy, make it smaller. So they would ground me in like, okay, this is a MALAT, it's graduate studies research, has to be very finite and concise. So your question has to be very tight. So lots of coaching from supervisor and other students on how to fine tune it. But definitely it was something that kind of sat in my brain, but was triggered by the learnings and then just evolved.
As you spoke about that evolution of your question, I saw Chad and Brandon's heads at the same time bob up and down. Brandon, did you want to talk a little bit about how your question came to be?
All through my work experience, actually, from getting the position at eCampus Ontario, that question kind of came to my head, and working with different professors, classmates, just again, fine tuning to get that correct wording in for the question, but the topic was figured out through my work experience, which again was brought to me through the MALAT program.
Very cool. And Chad, I see in the chat box you shared that your research question grew as you progressed throughout the course. Did you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, well, by growing, I mean like it exploded out. Like I had like a kernel of an idea that as soon as it was in the MALAT program went poof, and then the same thing that Brandon and Christy are talking about, then it was like dialing it back. And so making sure that you learned how to really focus in on what was really important. So that took a lot of work to take all that big question and to make it into something smaller and concise and some sub questions from there.
Thank you guys so much. We had a question asked early on that Elizabeth answered in our chat box, but I'd love to read it out loud because I think it's something that comes up quite often when folks are thinking about this program. And perhaps Chad, Brandon, Christy, you might have something to add. So White SJ had said, curious, I really do not have much of a background in learning technologies other than contributing to the development of online trainings, running webinars, etc. I manage a team virtually and have been for 4 years. However, I think this program is very fitting in light of what you are all explaining as it relates to the pandemic. Is it okay that I don't have more technology experience? And then Elizabeth had shared, thanks for your question. And yes, it's fine that you don't have deep technology experience, but this program doesn't focus on teaching software programs, but rather in part how to use what we know about the affordances of technologies and the way we humans learn to design and create engaging learning environments. So do you guys have any commentary on your experience in terms of actually navigating the different softwares? Chad?
Well, if you look at my LinkedIn profile, I think I've got that I'm a recovering technophile, meaning like I love tech. I love programming, I love coding, I love all the tech and ed tech that goes along with it. I thought when I was joining the MALAT program, I was going to learn that even more. I was going to learn articulate storyline and all this fun stuff. And I was going to get really excited about that. And then I started learning that it has nothing to do with the tech. And you start learning that the tech is a tool and that everything else, like all the pedagogy, that's what's important and how to use those tools. And when it comes down to it, if I could teach in Zoom as well as face-to-face, it doesn't matter. It's the teaching practices. And so that's important. So with all the tech stuff, don't be daunted and intimidated by the tech, because the tech that we do use, it's very simple to use. And if you have problems with it, somebody is there to walk you through, whether it's somebody in your cohort or faculty. It's not an issue at all. To me, it's a non-issue. It's the other things that are the issues, are the learning about the practices and the pedagogy.
Very cool. Thanks, Chad. Brandon, I noticed you got a bit excited at this question. Did you want to just share a little bit about your experience?
I was in the same boat as Chad. I kind of thought, okay, coming in here, my background's all on the tech side of things. Like, this is going to be a walk in the park. I know a lot of this stuff already. I do it for my job. Then you get into actually what the program is, and you're like, nope, I'm learning a lot here, and it's not going to be as easy as I thought. To go back to it, it's not about the tech. It's more about the learning side of things, and you will get so much out of this afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was the opposite. Completely. Hand me a $50,000 ventilator and I can take care of a patient on life support. But I used Facebook, I used email, I used all the basics of social media, but really no, keen interest in technology at all. It was all of the learning. And so what I'm loving right now is grounding my healthcare providers in, so say if I was to hand you a brand new IV pump and you're a nurse, there's a portion of your brain that's going to focus on that brand new IV pump for a little while. And then eventually you're going to settle into remembering that there's a patient attached to it. So where I am right now is grounding them into practicing as much as they can in Zoom and get rid of all the techie, where the heck is this and how do I click this and make a breakout room and how do I annotate and screen share? Get over it. And remember who's on the other side of the screen, because you're there to care for the patient. And so I'm creating them excellent, awesome checklists and resources on how to stay patient-centered, because I learned that in this course, right? It's about that the teaching and learning relationship is mirrored in healthcare. We're not just always seeing, doctor to patient. It's often dietitian to 22 patients, and she's teaching them, health promotion, prevention, how to self-manage their illness. So we have this whole education parallel over in healthcare that we weren't prepared for, and they're struggling with one foot in healthcare and one foot in education. So it's been amazing to stay grounded in that the tech is a tool. The tech is a tool. You're going to get good at it, and then it won't matter if I change it and you're not using Zoom anymore. It'll just be a different tool, and you'll still be doing the same great patient care through the screen.
Wow. Thank you all so much. Highlighting the people on the other side of the screen. I recognize that we are past our 1 o'clock mark. So thank you all so much for sticking with us and listening to what our wonderful students have to share. I think that was a great question to wrap up on for today. But that said, the conversation is never over. So please connect with our teams, learn.more at rurals.ca, learn.more.international at rurals.ca. Myself, Elizabeth, we're all here to help, and we're all here to continue answering these questions. And I can see in the chat box, Brandon has popped his LinkedIn in as well. We are always eager to create connections between our prospective students and our alumni as well. So if you want to have these one-on-one conversations with our current students, beautiful alumni, please pop that in your email, as our teams are absolutely able to make that happen. So with that, we wish you a wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, depending on when you're watching this recording. And we thank you so much for joining us in today's discussion. Bye-bye, everyone.